Hello, and welcome to this simple tutorial on how to get started with using Illustrator if you are a beginner. When you open up Illustrator, you'll see a menu that is just pretty blank. However, you'll want to start a new file to create your first design. In this panel over here, you'll see different dimensions of different artboards. However, if you don't see a good template of a dimension, you can always change it over here by adjusting the width and height as you see fit. If you do not want to use inches, say you want to use specific pixels or centimeters, you can also use this drop-down menu to change that fact. You can also adjust the amount of artboards you have. Say you want to create multiple designs on a single file. You can increment this by one or more. If you want to add bleed, say you are creating a design and that design may go off the edge of the artboard, then you would want to add bleed here. Bleed is usually done uniformly throughout the entire design, so it would be 1/8 of an inch on the top and then 1/8 of an inch on all sides. However, if you're not doing anything for print, then there's no proper need for a bleed. If you are designing for web, you would want to use an RGB color. However, if you're designing for print, then you would most likely want to use a CMYK color. This mainly just has to do with the printing of certain elements. However, we do not need to worry too much about this. I will be using RGB for the sake of this tutorial. Once you have set all these settings correctly, you'd want to hit create. When you've set up your artboard, you may notice that your panels may look a bit different than how mine are. To get your panels the way that mine are, you would go to Windows, go to Workspace, and then go to Essentials Classic and click on that. When you're creating your design, you first want to go to your Layers panel. With layers, you'll be able to adjust elements individually and in proper groups. This helps a lot with organization. I like to at least set up 3 layers to begin with. I like to do my first one as a text layer. My second one could be a artworks layer. And my third one could be a guides layer. You may be wondering what is a guides layer for. Guides are for a built-in element in Illustrator that helps with organizing your designs. With guides, you'll be able to create small squares, or big squares depending on what you need, around your artboard so you can keep in mind your margins. To set up a simple guide, make sure you are clicked into your guides layer, go over to the rectangle tool, you can also press M, and start creating a giant rectangle all around the artboard. It does not need to be exact because we can edit this setting later. Once you have created this giant rectangle, you may notice that it's not necessarily the most centered in the artboard. This can be adjusted by going up here and pressing the center tool to make it centered horizontally, and then this center tool to make it centered vertically. However, it's somewhat of an uneven margin between the top and the sides. So to fix this, we can go over to this transform panel and set it to an exact inches. My artboard is 7 by 5 inches. And if I want 1/8 inches on both of the sides, that means I would need to do 7 minus 0.25, or 1/4 of an inch. Same thing with the height. If I want 1/8 of an inch on the top and bottom, I would do 5 minus 0.25. It is very nice that there is a simple calculator built into Illustrator so you don't have to do all the math yourself. Because this is a guide, you do not want to have a specific fill inside of this square. So you'll click on the fill option and press the box that has a red slash in it. This means that there is no fill at all. This also is the same for the stroke. You do not want a stroke on a guide layer. Once you have this setting set up, you would then want to press Ctrl 5 to create the guide. And with that in mind, this guide will now persist even if you click off of the guide. You can also lock it in place physically with the layers option by pressing the option right next to the eye. You'll be able to always keep an 1/8 margin on your artboard. This can be a very useful technique if you're ever designing like a postcard or something. Moving on to actually illustrating, you can use options such as the rectangle tool again, the line tool, or the multitude of different pen tools. I like to use this pen tool because it allows me to freely draw. By doing certain points, you'll be able to click around and that will start creating a shape. However, you'll need to go to the original point to finish and complete your shape. With this being said, you'll notice that this shape seems a bit empty. And that's because when we were setting up the guides, we had set the automatic setting for it to have no fill and no stroke. To add in a stroke, you can either click in here and add a swatch, or you can press the arrows over here to add that in. For the fill, you'll do the same as when we removed it and click in and add a different color. We'll add red for just visibility. With this shape that we have, we can move it around by using the select tool. You can use the select tool by pressing the V button. With this select tool, you'll notice there's a box around the entire illustration. With this illustration box, you are able to hover over one of the squares and change the size of the illustration. If you go to the corner and go a little bit away from the square, you'll see it turn into this arc. With this arc, you'll be able to rotate your shape. If there is ever a moment where you rotate or transform a shape and you don't like how it looks and want to go back a step, you can always do Ctrl Z. This is not necessarily just for transforming a shape. Whenever you do an option and you would want to undo it, you can always press Ctrl Z. Now you might notice that it's a bit hard to get a proper grasp of our shape by being so far away. To actually get a proper look at your shape, you can use the zoom tool over here. However, I like to just press Alt and then use the scroll wheel to scroll forward to the shape or object. However, I didn't actually want to zoom in on this corner. I wanted to zoom in over here. So you can hold down on the mouse button to pan over to this corner instead. You can also press the hand tool over here to do the same effect. There are many different options you could do with specific points because Illustrator is a vector program. To mess with specific points on your shape, you go to this white selection tool instead of this black selection tool. With this white selection tool, you can click on specific anchors that you can mess around with individually. So if I hold this one, I can move this itself. However, it doesn't move the entire object. With this tool selected, you can get this menu brought up as well. This menu can either remove the point in particular, and it then fills in the shape as if the point was not there. You can smooth out the point as if it was a rounded shape instead of as pointed, or you can make the shape more pointed. You also may smooth out the point. However, this doesn't usually work as well if it is just one specific point. What you would need to do is select the whole object and then smooth it out. As so. This is a bit more simplistic of an object, I would say. However, the effect of it being an object is still there. Now that we have created our shape and we've adjusted it to our liking, we can freely move it around, and I'm going to just move this a bit down so we can add in a bit of text at the top. Make sure to go to your text layer and then select the T tool over here as the text tool. You can also just press the T button to bring up the text tool. By just clicking in, you'll get a simple text window in which you can start typing. For this, we'll just do first object. When you're done with this, you will then go over here, press the select tool, and then you are able to freely move around your text. It also has a simple box around it, which means you can extend it, making it taller, wider, or more uniformly big. If you want to make sure it doesn't get too wide or tall, You can also hold Enter while making it bigger so that it's all correctly uniform. If you want it centered, you can always remember to center it over here so it is centered in the middle of the screen. And if you ever want to move it a bit down but still keep it centered, you can always select it, hold Shift, and then move down. And then it won't move to the side unless you really go away, in which it will start moving in a 45-degree angle. So I'll like to move this down a little bit right there. Now, if I want to make all of these in the center, I would just simply drag and select both objects and just move them up. And once you see these two pink lines right there, you'll know that it is correctly in the center for both of these objects. And this is our simple tutorial on how to use Illustrator. To quickly review what we've gone over how to create different layers, how to create an object, how to edit the different widths and heights of the object, how to change the fill of an object, how to create a stroke on an object, how to create a bit of text, how to move that text and keep it centered, how to undo an action, and we've also discussed on how to even create the artboard as a general. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, there's a lot more to Illustrator than just these simple instructions. However, that is a much longer video, I would say. So for now, this is just a simple tutorial on how to get your feet wet in a bit of what Illustrator has to offer. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.